today in Rich in Relationship. We're going to talk about what happens when you feel like you're giving, and getting almost nothing in return. Not doing what you've been doing is the first part of the recipe, right? I mean, the definition of insanity is if you do the things you've always done, you always get what you've always got. One-sided love isn't always about who cares more. It's about who's doing more of the invisible emotional work. And emotional work is often invisible. Welcome to another episode of Rich in Relationship. I'm your host, Rich Heller, and today we're going to talk about when love feels one-sided. Not just when it feels one-sided, but how to spot it and recover from emotional imbalance. And I know that some of you are like, how to spot it? I'm in it. What do you mean how to spot it? So let's just make some distinctions here about what we're talking about. We had a death in our family recently. My wife's father passed away a few months ago. And necessarily, I have been giving. And she's been involved in her own grief and her own process. That's a one-sided experience to some extent. And it's what I signed up for. It's not that she's neglecting me or abusing me. It's that she's going through her stuff, right? And so we're all going to go through stuff in life, lose a job, lose a partner, whatever. And it's going to feel one-sided. And that's part of the marital deal, right? The marital deal, the contract, the real contract of marriage, as we talk about it on Rich in Relationship, we're going to stay together for life, for many of us. And the purpose is that I'm going to help you to be the best person you can possibly be. Not the best person I think you can be. The best person you can possibly be, given how you want to develop and grow. And you're going to help me be the best person I can possibly be, given how I want to develop and grow and my latent skills and abilities. And that means that sometimes I'm going to carry you and sometimes you're going to carry me. That's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about here is when someone's been carrying, and the reason isn't as apparent as the death of a loved one or a job loss or something like that. In our last episode, we talked about emotional debt. And in our next episode, we're going to talk about the emotional spending plan budget, or really the concept of an emotional bank, more in depth. In this episode, we're going to address the question of what happens when one person is doing the checking in, planning everything, managing the moods, and they're sure that if they stopped, the whole relationship would stop. What do you do when you feel like that? And there are a lot of circumstances where people feel like that. I was just on a call with a guy who we'll call Brad. Brad was on the phone with me earlier today. And Brad has been tossed out of the house because he was drinking. That's not an unusual situation. I get a lot of Brads like that, by the way. Sometimes I get Gwens like that. And part of the reason why he was tossed out of the house because he was drinking is because Gwen has some trauma around drinking, lost a sibling to alcohol, basically. But part of it is that Brad has a long history of coming home inebriated and scaring Gwen and their children. And Gwen feels that she's been carrying him and carrying their marriage. She's afraid to do things with him because she's afraid of what's going to come next. She feels she's carrying the whole relationship, and that if she didn't hold things together, then Brad would just go out and get upside down all the time. Emotional imbalance is what happens after emotional debt builds up. One partner keeps the account afloat while the other coasts. And in this instance, Gwen feels she's been keeping the account afloat. Now, I want to be really clear that Brad has Gwen and their children in a nice big house. Brad has been earning money and supplying their material needs. We're not talking about that here. We're talking about emotional needs. This is about one-sided emotionally. One-sided love isn't always about who cares more. It's about who's doing more of the invisible emotional work. And emotional work is often invisible when you have a partner like this Brad I was just describing to you, who feels like, well, you know what? I'm earning a ton of money. I'm doing everything that needs to be done. She doesn't want to play along. I'm going to go have my own fun. The emotional work seems absolutely invisible when that's your mindset. And people who drink a lot usually are not super in touch with their emotions anyway, because that's the whole purpose of drinking a lot. There are a lot of examples where there can be this kind of emotional imbalance that's been ongoing. Now, I'm going to stick up for Brad. The emotional imbalance has been going on because Gwen thinks the cause is Brad's drinking. The emotional imbalance has been going on because Brad isn't clear about what's really driving his drinking. He may have a problem with alcohol. He may just be using it heavily. We don't know. But until the underlying feelings are addressed, neither Brad nor Gwen will really know what the problem is. And because it is the two of them and they've been doing this dance for years, Gwen has some responsibility, not for Brad's choices, but for the emotional invisibility. And so all of you who feel or listen to this and who feel your relationship is one-sided, I'm telling you, you have some responsibility. That doesn't mean that you're not married to a Brad who has maybe something else going on. It means that there's something about the way you're interacting with this Brad that's been allowing this one-sidedness to go on for a long time. And I want you to listen closely to this episode, because the whole purpose of this episode is to help you see what's next. Imbalance, like Brad and Gwen's, breeds exhaustion, resentment, and silence. The three quiet signals that connection is slipping, and usually it isn't revealed until there's a crisis like I just described to you. Now let me tell you about another Brad and Gwen. After years of juggling work and a young child, Brad and Gwen were running on routine. Gwen planned every detail, meals, holidays, even their quality time. Brad kept the bills paid and the house maintained, but rarely initiated closeness. Guess what? This Brad I'm telling you about is not that different than the Brad who I was just talking to. The more she reached out, the more defensive he became. In fact, the more she reached out, the more he felt criticized and went out and did his own thing. Gwen started following emotional labor posts online and decided to pull back, to stop managing everything. Within weeks, the silence was deafening. And Gwen didn't know what to do. And I'm going to tell you that pulling back, not doing what you've been doing, is the first part of the recipe, right? I mean, the definition of insanity is if you do the things you've always done, you always get what you've always got, right? You can't change anything. So Gwen took the first step, which was to pull that back, but she didn't know what was next. And oddly, when she pulled back, Brad noticed, but he just figured it was a phase she was going through. Gwen said, "I feel empty." And Brad said, "I'm not sure what's going on. I feel like I'm doing everything right, but I know something must be wrong." After a couple of meetings together, Brad started to understand the idea of emotional fluency. And he recognized that he was far from emotionally fluent. In fact, he had trouble putting labels to his emotions. The only emotion he could put labels to was, "I'm mad, frustrated. It's your fault," blame. He didn't have contact directly with other emotions. And if he did, he didn't have labels for them, because putting labels to them would mean that he'd have to own them and feel them. And Brad wasn't ready to do that. But through working together, he started to put labels on some of those other emotions. I said to him, "Brad, mad is a reactive emotion to some other feeling that's there. Usually we're feeling something else when we feel mad. Let's talk about, what are you mad about?" He said, "Well, I'm mad that Gwen is always criticizing me. I come home from work, a hard day of work, and she criticizes me for not hearing what she's saying to me and not being there for her emotionally. And I'm there and I'm listening." And I said, "So it sounds like you feel angry because underneath it, you feel maybe a little misunderstood, or something like she's not recognizing your effort." He said, "That's right." And I said, "What's the feeling that comes up when your effort isn't recognized?" He said, "Well, I get mad." I said, "Yeah, but under that?" He said, "I feel a little hurt." I said, "That's the word." I said, "Brad, if you could start touching on the feeling under the anger and labeling it and just sharing that label with her, it's going to tell Gwen that something's changing, that You are no longer participating in emotional invisibility. Together, they listed who carried what. Not only did they go through all the logistics of the house, which Brad made sure was taken care of, but they went through the emotional side of managing the family, which Brad wasn't fully aware of. When he started to understand all the effort that Gwen made, keeping his siblings and parents in the loop, her siblings and parents in the loop, what she did to make sure that the kids connected with their friends, to make sure that she and Brad connected with the friends of their kids. He started to appreciate all the effort that she was making when he realized that she decided the days that people were coming over, contingent on his availability, of course, when he found out that she sent out the invitations, when he found out that she thanked people when they had people over, he started to understand that social relations require a different kind of work. When he found out that she made sure that everyone who came to their house felt heard, cared for, and left feeling good. And when he found out that when they went places, she made sure that the hosts and hostess felt appreciated, he started to see behind the scenes. They listed all the things she was doing, the communication things she was doing, the gratitude. They listed what were the ways that they needed to repair their own emotional communication. They took an inventory. They took an inventory of what each of them had been doing, and they took an inventory of what they were going to share so that he could become more emotionally aware, continuing labeling and speaking those labels. And she could start to appreciate more what he was doing. She became more financially fluent, which wasn't part of the problem, but it was, because the reason why she didn't really call out the imbalance in the relationship was she was afraid of what would happen financially if things came apart. She tolerated the situation because she had a fear of financial instability. And when she started to understand where the money was going and that she had access to it too, and she started becoming a partner in those decisions, she felt more empowered. And I'm here to tell you that emotional empowerment and financial literacy go hand in hand when it comes to marriage. I'm hoping to get speakers to help, particularly for ladies, regarding financial literacy. And I can sit here and talk to men about emotional literacy, but if part of the problem is that women don't feel empowered in their marriage because they have concerns about financial stability, then we need to bring in experts on how to address that. So look forward to those episodes when they come up. As Brad became more emotionally literate, they started having regular check-ins. They didn't just say, "How was your day?" "Fine." "What did you do?" "This thing really frustrated me." They also said, "What really brought you joy today?" And those conversations opened up opportunities to really talk about emotion. What was it about that brought you joy? "Oh, I did this thing at work. It reminded me of when I was a kid. I want to do more of it. It's something I really enjoyed then. I think I really enjoy it now." "What is it you enjoyed about it?" They started to have in-depth conversations as Brad became more emotionally literate and as Gwen became more financially empowered. They reestablished equal care. 3 weeks later, Gwen said, "For the first time, I don't feel like I'm parenting the relationship." Brad said, "Now I know how to show up, not just show up tired." And what he meant by that was how to show up for Gwen, because Gwen was tired too, and he didn't even notice it. Gwen was exhausted, emotionally exhausted. So what worked here is emotional visibility replaced invisibility. They took an inventory and they rebalanced emotionally, and they rebalanced financially, and they rebalanced logistically. They rebalanced the relationship, because when one person becomes a specialist and closes the other person out, it actually disempowers the other person. And it also makes excuses for these kinds of emotionally one-sided relationships. Competence replaced confusion. Gwen felt like, "Hey, you know what? If Brad goes into a coma, I know what to do with the money now. I know who to call. I know who to ask for help on the things that I don't understand." Partnership replaced performance. Brad took charge of his own siblings and his own parents. Brad got more involved with the fathers of the children that his children were playing with. They got involved in their local church. Brad got involved in the men's group there, where emotional literacy was a big topic. And as they both grew individually in the areas that they were weaker in, as they both felt stronger in the areas they had been weaker in, love was no longer one-sided, because that is the nature of partnership. You need to appreciate the work that each of you are doing. You need to have some understanding of how to do it yourself, just in case. And you need to help each other to learn and grow in each other's weaknesses from the strengths that you each have. If you're tired of doing all the emotional heavy lifting like Gwen, you could be a Brad, you could be a Gwen, I don't know. But if you're tired of doing all the emotional heavy lifting and you're not sure what's next, you're not sure how to talk about it, go to richinrelationship.com and join The Bridge, our free community. Tons of resources there, no charge for them. And the only emails you'll get from us are really weekly emails about podcasts and blog posts and what we're putting out there, tools that will help you. Next episode, we're going to really dive deep into the emotional spending plan or the emotional bank account or even the emotional budget, whatever you want to call it. It's important to really understand how this works and all the ways that we put in and take out of it. Until then, have an amazing day and a fantastic tomorrow. And thank you for tuning in.